Joe, let's get rolling here. Lane Kiffin has announced that he is going to be the next head coach of the LSU Tigers. I've been speaking about this all day, every day for the last 3 days. I haven't stopped. I really want to hear somebody else's thought on it. So I kick it over to you first, my good man. Hold that Tiger. Lane Kiffin coming to Baton Rouge. What are your thoughts?
A couple things with this. On the LSU side of things, this was the move that you had to go and make. You made the big, splashy, aggressive hire, pulling Brian Kelly away from Notre Dame with your last opening, and it failed. You couldn't come around and hire a smaller name G5 coach. You just couldn't. You're one of the premier brands in the sport. You're one of the premier jobs. You had to be aggressive. You had to go and get the biggest name that was out there. They boxed out Florida and ultimately boxed out Ole Miss. I understand that Ole Miss fans are upset. I understand that they're disappointed that they couldn't keep their guy. And I'm not going to try and belittle and talk down to Ole Miss fans and say, you guys shouldn't expect to be able to keep big coaches and that you're not good enough to keep somebody like Lane Kiffin. It's just the sad reality of the sport. There's been an over a century's worth of this sport that has happened where brands have built up to the point where certain ones control and have a lot more weight in decisions like this. Lane Kiffin's best recruiting class at Ole Miss in the state of Mississippi was 17th.
In a high school perspective, not portal, but to your point,
right. There was clearly a ceiling that had been hit with the roster building that he was capable of producing. He needed to go somewhere that had a better pool of talent, that was easier to recruit in state, and that he can do it on a consistent basis. For anyone who wants to argue with me about that, go look at the 2026 recruiting class for LSU. Most of those guys are still committed. A lot of those guys still want to come and play for LSU.
The guys are from Louisiana too.
Right. This is all the whole point. And Blake, the last part with this before I kind of let you, I know that you've got a lot to share with this. I feel like a lot of people, as a counter to me saying that Kiffin needs to go somewhere else to recruit better, people are saying that he's a bad recruiter. He's not a good recruiter. If he's such a bad recruiter, then how is he capably put together some of the best portal classes every single year? Recruiting in the portal is a completely different situation than going after high school guys. If you are a good recruiter and you're capable of getting guys and convincing them to come play for you, you're going to be able to put together some of the best classes every single year through the transfer portal. But you have to have a foundation built through high school in order to get to a position to consistently compete for national titles. It was becoming eventually untenable, and this is the best possible thing for him to reach that upper tier of coaches and for him to win national titles.
LSU fired a coach worth $53 million and retained the number 1 and number 5 overall players in the class. Lamar Brown's the number 1 player in the class of 2026 out of Baton Rouge, and Richard Anderson's the number 1 defensive tackle in the country. They didn't have a head coach. Ole Miss did not and has not been able to sustain that. You talk about Trey'Dez Green, Joe, the 6'7" tight ends that can run a fade route from 30 yards against arguably one of the best corners in Oklahoma and go up and snatch it on him and big boy him. Does that fall off on trees? No. Look, LSU, in my opinion, which you can differ with this, Joe, but in my opinion, when it is rolling, it's a top 3 job in the sport. You don't have another P4 job in the state. Quite honestly, you can go through the entire Gulf Coast in recruiting in Mississippi and Mobile, which most places or most things are LSU related. A lot of big LSU people are there. You can go inside the state of Texas because most of your alumni base outside of the state lives in the city of Houston. By the way, AYS, the number 1 out-of-state thing that I have, Joe, 30% of our listeners live in the city of Houston. That's why LSU recruits, because that's where the alumni base goes from engineering to have jobs, etc. The bottom line that I'm trying to make here, and coming off of what you just said, LSU's the better job, and it's about time that Ole Miss fans understood that. LSU's actually been in this same situation before, but not in the same exact situation. Joe, our former coach, coached at Alabama for 17 years, and we had to deal with it. We had to play them every year, and quite honestly, over the last 2 decades, for a lot of what it was worth in the SEC, LSU and Alabama determined who won the damn SEC. We've been there. We understand it. We know where you're coming from. But Lane Kiffin saw an opportunity that he couldn't pass. The calendar screwed him. There are so many people trying to play him as the villain. What about John Summerall? What about John Summerall or Eric Morris? Now, you could say, well, Blake, Tulane to Florida is a big leap. Is it? Yes. How big of a leap is Ole Miss to LSU? You're talking about potentially a top 5 job. Joe, by the way, newsflash, did you know that Louisiana had 3 of the top 15 recruits inside the state for the 2027 class? Did you know that they had 9 top 150 players inside the state of Louisiana for next year's class? That's what the point is. So when Nick Saban went up on College Game Day and said, listen, I think Lane wants to make this opportunity because he can develop and build from within, and it's not the portal situation. He could get better talent there. That is a big situation. Joe, and I got to be honest with you. LSU, I don't know how to say this, and I know we probably don't want to try to get graphic because we try to stay as much of a PG show as we can. LSU put their nuts on the table, and they didn't back down from anybody. Last Wednesday, Florida was out of this, and I'll get to that in just a moment. They never wavered. Lane Kiffin, Jimmy Sexton asked for something. Okay, sounds good. Actually, you know what? We're gonna up that NIL money. Everybody tried to convince me and tell me, oh, LSU is doing this and Ole Miss is going to match. Joe, did they match? When it was all said and done, did they match? Because from what I understand, they didn't, nor could they. LSU went from one of the most disorganized situations to Joe to quickly aligning and getting the best coach that anybody could have gotten around the country that's actually viable to go and get. You're not going to get Ryan Day. You're not going to get Kirby Smart. I mean, maybe Dabo. I mean, maybe you could throw that in there, but I would take Lane Kiffin over Dabo right now. You look at this situation, LSU not only, in my opinion, hit a home run. Joe, when this is all said and done, they could have hit a grand slam. Now, if you do it to Ole Miss, you do it everywhere you've gone. Does he do it to LSU? I'm sure that he could. I'm sure that that's going to be a fear in the back of LSU people's minds. But at the same time, I don't see the same Lane Kiffin from 5 years ago. I do think he's changed. I think he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. People need to understand what Joe, Brian Kelly literally didn't work, and LSU had 3 seasons with 29 total wins. What are we discussing here? So when you talk about one of the top, you can't have the take that Brian Kelly didn't work and then him have 29 wins in 3 seasons.
Well, and he also those who were privy to what was happening behind the scenes. There's people I've talked to. There's people that you've talked to. He was half-assing recruiting as much as he possibly could have. And they still were one of the best recruiting classes. They still had one of the best recruiting classes every single year that he was there. That is the absurdity of how easy it's been to recruit at LSU in the state of Louisiana. And imagine if you have somebody who is a more deliberate, motivated, younger coach, not much younger, but younger coach like Lane Kiffin. Like, I think that one thing needs to be established here. I think people need to understand the separation between Lane Kiffin and Brian Kelly. And the way that we understand the separation is go back and look at when Brian Kelly left Notre Dame. Brian Kelly left Notre Dame, and most Notre Dame fans weren't upset. I know that it was perceived that way, and Notre Dame fans tried to tell LSU fans continuously, we're not bothered by you taking him away. We were actually happy for the fact that he was leaving because it was getting to a point where it was known that he was mailing it in, that he was doing the bare minimum, and he was expecting results to be produced to a degree that they weren't going to come based on the way that he was setting up Notre Dame. He comes to LSU and he mails it in even further because he's got this gigantic contract and buyout. That was the way that it was perceived after he was fired. Lane Kiffin leaves, and this is the most dramatic reaction to a firing, a departure since when he left Tennessee. So the fact that we're watching a fan base
I think Alabama's was worse in a lot of ways because he left and they were going to play for a national title. But I get what you're saying.
My point is, Blake, is that if a fan base is reacting like this, they're recognizing what they're losing.
Correct.
And I think a lot of people who've been paying attention to the sport realize that Ole Miss has not been a successful football program in the history of college football.
Right.
He turned them into a consistently successful winning program. It's not like Brian Kelly, who stepped in at Notre Dame and did just enough for them to win 9-10 games every single year and couldn't really get past that. Got to a couple national championship game, a college football playoff game a couple times, and that was the most that he could do. He could never win against the big teams. I feel like Lane Kiffin now gets an opportunity to really prove himself. And to your point, this was the absolute right move that you had to make. This was the best option that was on the table that you realistically could go and get.
I mean, they did exactly what they needed to do. Now, talking about on the field, Joe, like LSU's not been able to establish the run game. I think the biggest lie about Lane Kiffin and his offense is that they're a pass-happy team. Joe, they're number one in the SEC in rushing the last 5 years. They average 220 rushing yards per game. Sign me up. Where do I sign up for that? I think what Lane sees is, and something I just got done talking about that I bring up with you. Let's look at the track record of LSU for just a quick moment. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. What do all of them have in common? Now, most of them
from Louisiana.
Well, they're all from Louisiana. Most of them from New Orleans, ironically. And you have the chance to go do it again.
I want to add something to that before you can continue here. I pulled up an article from Fox. These are the top 10 states in producing NFL players.
Okay.
Texas, Florida, California, Georgia, North Carolina, Louisiana's at 6. And then cities, New Orleans is at 8. They have 19 active NFL players. So,
and
I don't know how much more evidence you need.
Well, and here's the thing. Is that per capita?
No, I mean, that's just total number.
Okay, well, per capita, where would it be? Because Louisiana only has 4 million people in it.
That's even crazier way of.
So we're not even bigger than the city of New York. And look at what they're producing. Joe, on the field, I think that this is going to be awesome. Do they keep Blake Baker? Do they keep this defensive staff? I know you and I don't really talk about staff a lot. I do think they should keep Blake Baker and Corey Raymond, but I think that they're about to flip some kids. And I think that, look, at the team that spent the number one most money in the portal last year and got the number one overall portal class, do they do it again? And how quickly can they turn this thing around for a team that, Joe, their defense, look what they did to Oklahoma last week. I think that's a massive hire. It's a big time thing, and LSU people and LSU boosters are going to rally behind it. He just got off the plane, by the way, and he's already screaming "Go Tigers" out the window. He understands it, where Brian Kelly really didn't. And Joe, on the field, I mean, overnight, you've changed your offensive philosophy.
I'm really curious how quickly they can hit the ground running here. I think that's the biggest question. How much patience do you
rebuild a little bit? They got to rebuild a little bit.
Yes and no. I feel like if Kiffin's capable of keeping, I think, most of the young core on this roster, I don't think that there's no reason not to believe that they can't be a 9-win team next season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their schedule is off the top of my head, but I feel like
they got a brutal one. They got a brutal one.
They've put together a couple of really high-quality recruiting classes that we have talked about on our signing day shows every single year. If you could keep a lot of those guys in the boat and sticking and chugging forward, that is going to be huge for them reaching early potential. I would think that a lot of these guys in your core, a lot of really talented offensive players that didn't really get a chance to play to their potential. I think a lot of those guys would be excited about Lane Kiffin coming in. I think the guy like Harlan Berry and Trey'Dez Green, those guys, if they stick around this year, would be juiced up to be utilized by Lane Kiffin's offense. And I think that you do have to keep Blake Baker. I think Blake Baker proved that he's one of the best DCs in the country. And when he's given the talent, he can take another step forward. And you don't want to lose any of these guys that hopefully are sticking around for this upcoming year. It feels like the defense has been pretty bought in based on the way that they played against Oklahoma yesterday. I feel like Baker has to be the one guy for certain that you need to really coerce and convince to stick around.
Well, and I think Corey Raymond too for this regard. Did you see that DB room yesterday? I mean, it wasn't Mansour DeLeone. It was a red-shirted. It was a freshman. It was and DJ Pickett. It was the number one corner in the country last year coming out. It was PJ Woodland, who's a true sophomore, and Deshaun Spears, who's a true sophomore. I mean, they haven't recruited bad. They just you're going. This is the way I characterized it, Joe. You're going from Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly to Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr., which I think getting Charlie Weiss Jr. and bringing over Savage, the strength and conditioning coordinator, is the biggest thing that could have happened for LSU. And I do think that they get this thing rolling. And by the way, LSU kicks off with Clemson in week 1 in Tiger Stadium next year in Death Valley.
That's going to be nuts. That's going to be absolutely nuts.
By the way, this is the last time that I'm wearing this hat. I'm going to a visor.
Oh, you're really going to bid it up? You're fully going to – are you going to start doing are you going to start doing hot yoga every morning too? Is that
I already did. I did hot yoga this morning.
Oh, I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
All right, how much do you want to wager?
Can you provide any proof?
Oh, yeah.
I need you to start making posts about doing hot yoga. If you're really going to go this all in on Kiffin and hot yoga. The bid.
I didn't do hot
yoga. I kind of want to talk about from the Ole Miss angle. I don't know if we're moving off to
we can do that. So